Hello, friends and extended family. How are you all doing? Um, I'm pretty sure my last video I said I was going to do a video every day, and that was over a week ago. So here I am, still hesitant to speak out on what the heck is going on in the world. But it helps me to vent. And so today I'd get back to adoption. And I wanted to discuss a part of adoption that we rarely see talked about in the forums and in the groups. And that is the minimum requirements to adopt a child and what those might be. So, who decides who gets to adopt children? What are the requirements? You know, and what should those requirements be based on adoptees' opinions, since we're the only ones who have experienced adoption? So I mean, let me ask you, what do you guys think? Like what should be the requirements to adopt a child? So the problem I think we run into, and that we can see probably very clearly today, more so than any other time in our lives, is the problem of beliefs. So it doesn't matter if you're a communist or a Nazi or a leftard or a redneck, as people are calling them. When you give up your child for adoption, did you ask? Did you even have a political affiliation? And years later, like, what would a Trump supporter think about giving a child to some extreme leftists, some Antifa or BLM members, or some LGBTQ extremists, or extreme feminists? What would they think? Probably wouldn't like it too much. Now, what about the other scenario, the extremely woke, you know, which is an oxymoron because they're more asleep than anyone with their bigotry. But what would they think if they were given the child to a church going, constitution loving, heteronormative, moralistic, righteous couple? Would they lose their minds? Because you got to understand that baby is going to have to survive. That's what we do. And they're going to have to assimilate. More so than any other time in your life will you have to assimilate as a baby. A baby has no choice but to assimilate or die. That's correct, isn't it? Do I need to show facts and studies to prove that? Or can we accept that as truth? So that sort of exposes the problem, doesn't it? So if I said, what about IQ? Below 80 is mentally retarded. I know a lot of you don't like that word, but there's mentally retarded people. Should we discriminate against them and not give them a child? Yet, if they're mentally retarded, do they have the cognizant awareness to look after themselves and a child? Probably not. And on top of that, we know statistically that when we give children of higher IQs to people of lower IQs, that their IQ can dip about 15 points, I believe the studies show. And I'm not going to cite anything. I go through my own stuff, and you can Google my stuff. And if you find some sort of, there's always a study out there that can refute anything. But I take this information, I look at the data, and I try to weigh it with my own gnosis, which is experienced knowledge. And, I try to put it together as a truth of how things would be. And it tends to work out pretty good if you can get really honest about yourself first. And that's the real trick, I think, in that we need the factual information about ourselves so we can make the best decisions. We also need the best factual information about our societies to make the best decisions. So all those things being said, there's a lot of systems that have gone on in the world that have worked to great degrees and helped us to progress as a species and to build a safer world for our children in a lot of cases, although this current paradigm apocalypse, if you want to call it that, which means great unveiling, and I think we're seeing the great unveiling in that we're seeing the information is available and we can find it, but we need to look at that information ourselves. And if we need help going through it, then we have to find people that can help us understand the information we don't understand. But at the same token, we can't allow our rhetoric to grab a hold of our emotions and then enslave us and possess us to go against our own interests and go against our own morals based on mob mentality. And that's what's happening. And unfortunately, those that are more easily influenced and maybe more vulnerable to manipulation are being utilized in very nefarious agendas. So, I think I'd like to discuss that, and I'd like to hear all your opinions about what you think the requirements for adopting a child should be, given that the child is going to be adopted, right? Not arguing whether or not they should be adopted. Adoption shouldn't take place. They should be with their families, except in the most dire of circumstances, as I always say, and there's always exceptions to the rule. So what do you think? So in the areas of physical, are they healthy, right? Are they living physically healthy lifestyles? Are they eating nutritious foods? Are they, is obesity going to be an issue? Right? Because, if someone's smoking cigarettes in the house, is that going to be okay, or is that not okay? What about if they drink? How much they drink alcohol? What about if they're on psychiatric drugs for depression? What about that? So the mental sphere too. What sort of mental limitations are going to exclude someone from adopting? Or are there mental limitations? Can someone with schizophrenia adopt a child? What about the trans issue? I mean, just a few days ago, it seems like days, but just a few short years ago, gender dysphoria was a DSM categorized mental illness. Now it's the law that if you decide you're the opposite gender, you just say it and you are. Somehow you are transformed into that. That doesn't work with race, though. You can't just decide you're a different race. And what about racial, right? So I mean, cultural as well. What about culture? Should we match the cultures or totally different cultures? What if those cultures don't align? So the child ends up being raised Christian or something that, is antithesis to, say, Islam. What if the child wants to go back to their birth family and they've been raised to be Christians? And Islam doesn't appreciate that and wants them to throw away the Christian God and Jesus Christ for Muhammad. What about that? Or vice versa. What about Jewish? What about satanic? What about pagan? So what are the stipulations to adopt a child? And what is the reasoning? What about politics? What about political issues? Would you take a Trump supporter's child and give it to a Bernie Bros supporter? These are big fucking questions, and nobody is asking them. Does anyone know the stipulations for adoption? I'm almost afraid to look. But, we can, it's obviously, in many scenarios, not about the best interest of the child. And how do I know that? Because I saw the movie Three Identical Strangers. If it was all about the best interests of the child, then they wouldn't have been given to, poor, medium, rich. They all would have been given to rich people, wouldn't they? Wouldn't that be the best interest of the child? So financially. But then we lead to the other questions. What about morally? What about intellectually? What about all the other things that we want to know about? What are the requirements? Anyone can have one? Is it whoever can bribe, whoever can pay the most? Is that the basis? What is it? Right? Because growing up with a lot of adoptees around me, I noticed a lot of sick mothers, physically ill mothers. And those adoptees, I ended up with the asthma and the allergies, which none of my birth family have. My friend growing up ended up with a thyroid condition, like his adoptive mother, who was extremely sickly and on a cocaine drip IV because of her illnesses with thyroid issues. So these issues, although allergies, as far as I know, are not contagious, if someone has allergies and then you give them a baby and they live the exact same sort of routine as that person and they develop allergies, well, doesn't that tell you exactly where those problems are coming from? They're coming from the routine of that person. If you did exactly what an obese person did, doesn't it not stand to reason you'd probably end up obese? Barring some sort of physiological disorder. But again, do you want to be giving healthy children to sickly people? Because why are they sickly? Right? Are animals sickly in nature? No. Well, when they are, they die off sooner. Right? That's how nature evolves. So, if you're scientific and you're believing in evolution and all that stuff, why would you want to devolve these healthy babies? Wouldn't you want to evolve them? So here's some questions to think about. And some of these questions lead into some interesting debates and questions that maybe we're not allowed to talk about. But doesn't that lead you to some other questions of why would there be serious issues that people don't want us to talk about them? Especially when they're in relation to things like adoption, which is very similar to something like slavery. Very similar. There's a lot of parallels between those two things in a big way. So here's some things to think about, and I want to hear from you. What should those limitations be? And I want to hear on all topics. So physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional. What sort of stipulations for the adopted people or adoptive family, parents, what should they be? So I look forward to hearing all your answers. So please all come out and participate, and let's expand our consciousness and our knowledge of this subject. Thanks.